Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. If you've built a successful business, you know the truth. Your expertise is high value, but your time is finite. The question is, how do you sustain that success without sacrificing your most valuable asset? We believe that the next level of success requires a strategic pivot, a fundamental shift that moves beyond the old ways. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix, your strategic growth partner. At Valentix, we believe that trust and authentic relationships are the only true currency in high-value business. We challenge the status quo by building an AI-powered client acquisition engine that enhances your human connection, helping you move beyond the slow growth of referrals. Our AI-powered systems eliminate the grind, allowing you to break through the noise, automate tasks, and free up your time to focus on transformative client impact. If you're ready to build a predictable growth engine, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Ian Saville, the founder of Saville Coaching. Ian's career is a unique blend of people development and systems thinking, spanning from art education and nonprofits to ad tech and working at Meta, where he supported the Reality Labs division. As a self-described people engineer, Ian now focuses on the intersection of human development and AI, building custom AI assistants for his executive coaching clients to deepen their developmental goals. His insights into overcoming unconscious bias, scaling human potential, and leveraging AI for enhanced coaching offer a powerful blueprint for leaders navigating today's complex landscape. Welcome to The Growth Shift.
David, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
And it's great to have you on the show today. Ian, your journey is a pretty unique blend of experiences, from art education and nonprofits to ad tech, working at Meta. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of congruency there. Tell us a little bit more about your journey and your experiences and how one thing led to the next.
On paper, my background looks like someone did one of those like a word improv games where you just fill in the random subjects and nouns and verbs and stuff. But the thesis has always been like, how do I help people grow and how do I build systems to enable it? So whether I was working with kids or I've been working with adults, sort of the underlying barriers to learning have always been, and sort of like growing have always been the same. And once I realized that, because I always thought I just had to go into teaching, I was like, oh, I got to go be a teacher to go help people grow. And then I realized I was like, oh, I don't actually love teaching in the school systems. I taught middle school as well. So it's like this 6th through 8th grade is a really special time. You know, anyone who says it's the best years of their lives is like someone you probably don't want to be hanging out with. That's a red flag for like a sociopath. So, you know, for me, the sort of the transition to understand and be like, oh, wait a second, I could become someone who helps adults learn was actually a pretty difficult one. It was pretty painful. So I made the pivot, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, but making that pivot was a really powerful moment for me to really step into understanding the underlying thing I love to do is just help people grow. And then like when you're successful with it, people want more of your time. So you have to build systems to really like scale yourself and scale your ability to help those folks grow. So yeah.
Curious here, Ian, because I mean, you're really system driven. You're in pursuit of helping people grow. I imagine a lot of the systems that you use and you have today were perhaps derivatives of what it is that you were doing with children when you were teaching middle school. Is that a correct assumption? I mean, tell us a little bit more about perhaps how starting in middle school as a teacher gave you some foundational experiences to help you start developing systems that will not just teach kids how to grow, but essentially enable adults to do the same.
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, it's interesting because this was also true in the nonprofit work I did, where I built an after-school youth program for 6th through 12th graders. And the things that I realized early on is that if you're getting bombarded with surface level questions about sort of like development or what to do next, or how do I draw this next element in the exercise, or whatever the case may be, it's like those aren't actually meaningful questions. But I mean, they're meaningful for that student in that moment because they, you know, they need to understand the they're stuck. But what I would be best leveraged to spend my time doing is like going a little bit deeper. Could I build things that actually address those surface level questions faster? So it's like, what do I need to do in my instruction? What do I need to do in my handouts? What do I need to do in sort of just the way I'm sort of like organizing the flow of the class to really actually get in front of a whole bunch of that surface level stuff so that I can sit more deeply with the students and really help them enrich their work. So that really came forward in my work with adults and my time at Meta, where, I was basically managing the team that supported all of tech. And so it's like I could have a whole bunch of people coming to me asking for book recommendations, or like, how do I have a feedback conversation? What's a framework I can use? Or I could front load all that stuff in a system that I can just point them to and say like, hey, go use this product, and then come back to me with the conversation, or come back to me with like what's really going on. And so it really allows me to deepen sort of like those coaching conversations or moments where I get to connect with people. And that to me is, I think, the really important thing, because if we keep it really surface, really transactional, the learning is going to be surface. It's going to be transactional. And that's not what this work is.
It seems like you've been on quite the trajectory yourself, not just of career path and, working in different industries, but of growth in yourself and of others. So as part of that, you're pursuing helping others grow. You must be pursuing some pretty significant growth yourself, and you must have experienced some pretty significant growth shifts and change along the way. What do you think has been the most impactful growth shift moment that you've experienced that allowed you to reshape how it is you think and really the approach you're taking to business today?
It's like, how do I present myself as someone who is actually really good with adults and doing adult education? So there was this key moment. It was actually like this very clarifying moment for me, where as a teacher, you talk about pedagogy, you talk about sort of like, showing up with the kids, talk about like, how do you do it, classroom instruction, the number of students you see, it's a lot of very, very education specific language. And I was interviewing, trying to get out of teaching. And, as I was going through these interviews, I was having a bunch of like interesting conversations, but they wouldn't go anywhere. And I was looking at marketing positions as well. I was like, I have an art background. Maybe I could make a pivot into art or into marketing, because I sort of am a creative and I could go that route. I had this conversation with this VP of customer success. I'll never forget it. I was on my phone, like in the park, having this interview. And he said to me, he's like, hey, Ian, I see that you're an art teacher. What did you do all day? Like just push paint around with the kids. And I was like, huh? What do you mean? By the way, this is for a technical training position. I had read the entire book on how to write in this particular software. Like I knew everything about this thing. And I got this question from the VP who'd be my boss. And I was like, cool. And I said, actually very candidly, I said, like, as I was kind of like processing this, I was like, I think we're probably not going to go much further in the interview process here. But let me just explain to you what an art teacher actually does. And so I started talking through the classroom management and also the administrative work and the emotional development and support. And there's a lot of nuts and bolts, right, that students don't see. And what I realized in the moment is that he was applying his 6th grade experience of an art teacher to what I offer today as a potential employee, as a potential hire. And so that unconscious bias that he had in that moment was really revealing for me, because I was like, oh, he just doesn't understand. But he's making all these assumptions that my job was like super easy and super fun. And I need to start getting in front of that. And so for me, that was like this huge pivot where I was like, the messaging has to change, and I have to like get really clear about my language when it comes to how I think about developing people, helping folks grow. And so I started moving to a place of saying, hey, look, because you get that question, right? It's like, tell me about yourself. Here we go. Here's the resume question or whatever, it's like, it's that opening interview thing. And so I started pivoting, and I would say like, hey, look, I take really abstract concepts and I make them concrete. And then people are like, what does that mean? I was like, great, you asked. And this is how it applies to ad tech, but here's how I did it in art. And then people are like, oh, I see the connection now. I see. So I did all this translation work for them up front, got rid of any unconscious bias. And then all of a sudden people are like, yeah, wait a second, you should come work here, and started getting a number of job offers, ultimately settling in on a really fantastic role at a company called X+1.
That's incredible. That is a really, really profound realization. It seems like one of the biggest things that happened there for you that changed your approach to communication and messaging was, yes, the recognition of that unconscious bias leading to surface level thinking and decision making, but even more importantly, the power in reframing and repositioning people's thinking in a way that they can connect the dots themselves, right? Leading them to that deeper level of thinking rather than just assuming that they could get there themselves.
Yeah, you meet them where they are, and if you just assume that people are going to meet you where you are, like that's just not going to work. And I think that that's a big part of coaching as well. Is like we just have to meet the folks where they are, and if we think about anyone, if we come into a learning space, it's like we have to build a container that allows for the learning. We got to meet people where their energy is, and if their energy is completely distracted, just they're not engaged in this particular stuff, then you pivot, you scrap the content, you say like, okay, let's do something different here.
So Ian, if we fast forward a few years from there, with what you learned, you founded Saville Coaching. Right? Tell us how this realization informed and shaped what it is you're doing today at Saville Coaching.
This is another great pivot story, right? So spent 8 years at Meta, was director of leadership development there, and then was part of the May 23 layoffs. And at that point, some former colleagues and we went and we co-founded a consultancy called The Collabic. And I did that work for 2 years where I was CTO, CFO, COO, sort of like a bunch of those C things. And, really loved doing the work. But what I started seeing more and more of was this anxiety and stress that's related to AI usage. And for me, I'd said, I need to go pursue this. I need to see what this intersection looks like with how we can really think about people development, but also use AI as a way to really deepen those developmental goals. And so I made the scary choice and said, go pursue this thing because there's a real tension here. And so for me, the work I do today is really focused around executive coaching, team development and facilitation, as well as program development. And I'm looking at it through the lens of how can we rethink some of the old modalities we use for learning and coaching and things like that, with AI being a creative thought partner in this process. And it's not going to be applicable everywhere, but it's one of those things where I'm already seeing really, really lovely early success with some of my clients who are actively using it.
Using AI to help deepen developmental goals.
Mm-hmm.
What does that actually look like in practice? Do you have a story that you could share with us about how it is that you came and ultimately helped a client use this to move themselves and their company forwards?
Yeah. So and it's still relatively early. I just made this is a very fresh pivot. So I just pivoted back in October with this. So, but even since then, when I think about an executive coaching engagement, oftentimes, 10, 12 sessions, you're going to have 3 developmental goals that you want to go after. And so I have a client right now who really struggles with delegation. So there's that really weird gap that a lot of leaders have to jump across, where they're so used to doing, and then they have to do through others. And then it's like this whole influence game that they have to play and things like that. And so being able to articulate expectations to people below them and across from them, it can be really hard for someone who's just normally used to going and doing the thing by themselves through brute force. So I've created an assistant, something that sits within their ChatGPT projects, and basically it's a partner that uses a very structured system prompt, and it helps them delegate. And so it asks a series of questions in the moment. It's like, hey, you need to delegate something to David, and David has he needs to do this thing by in 3 weeks, and sort of like, here's the expectation, here's the unsaid bar that is sort of like your internal success metric. And you sort of like flesh out all of these responses. And then it gives you this very structured delegation form that you can then hand to David and say like, David, I know my name is also David, and this is confusing, but here's the delegation thing you need to do. And so it helps build a muscle in the moment. And then in that, what's happening is the client has come back to me and these afterward, and we've been able to debrief. Okay, what was it like to do that? What was holding you back from that? What was the information that was missing in that process that you had to go back and chat with them about? So seeing some real encouraging wins early on where they're starting to use these in the moments that matter to get stuff off the plate and really actually step into the leadership roles. So it's a really powerful muscle builder while you're while you're still very nascent and sort of early on in that skill build. I think about it like I'm trying to get my son and I to do pull-ups more. We're trying to do pull-ups in the family, and those little rubber bands that you can use to kind of like help do some assist. It's the same thing. It's like the AI assistant is almost like an assisted pull-up.
In the moments that matter, right? Giving people the tools to help them get through those moments. It sounds like it's exactly what you're enabling your clients to do with AI, right? Because when it comes to even things such as seemingly simple and advantageous as delegation, right? That's a huge emotional roadblock to come over, right? Being able to relinquish control and hand it off to someone. And if you can free up a lot of the brain power that's required, coupled with the emotional side of it, I mean, and it's just the emotion they have to focus on, but know they have the right framework to get through it, that's really powerful.
And it is. And it's also really consistent. And I think that great leadership is consistent leadership. And so how do we help people in these skill development and sort of like those early stages get really consistent with their form, so that when they're actually doing really complex heavy lifting type work later on, it's still going to be the great form that's required.
So you've clearly had a number of different growth shift moments and pivots through your career, getting to where you are now. And at Saville Coaching, you're actively integrating AI, right? Trying to stay at the cutting edge, or is the leading front with it and what you do for your clients. There's got to be another growth shift coming your way as well. When we look at client acquisition and your pursuit of growth for the company, how are you now pursuing that next level of growth with client acquisition in mind? What's working for you today?
Yeah, talking the nuts and bolts of the business is something I love to do. It's one of those weird things that a lot of coaches don't love to do, but I think it's such a fascinating sort of back end. These are the systems, right, that allow us to scale so we can do this. Of course, I love it. So for me right now, it's interesting. I'm still in that space where relational work and sort of like the contacts that I have are really, really lovely, and they are really supportive of the work and they're curious about the work. And so I'm getting a fair bit of inbound through that, which is wonderful. A couple of things that I've been thinking about with this. One is, going into LinkedIn and really looking at sort of like those moments that matter for folks. So what does it mean to comment on something? What does it mean to message someone directly? And just say like, hey, I'm a human. I see that you're going through something. Here's my calendar. And so for me, like right now, a lot of the work I'm doing is really just about offering the gift of time and just saying, hey, if you want a sounding board, or it sounds like you're working through something, or hey, you just started a new company, and if you need like a couple tools or you just need some pointers, I'm here. And I will happily give my time in those moments, because I think that one of the unintended consequences of AI, same with social media, same with smartphones, all these tech, is that we're becoming more and more increasingly isolated. And it's just like, how might we actually have that more human connection? And so if I can give my time more freely, yes, please, and thank you. I think that's the lovely part of working for yourself too. You get to make the choice of how you want to spend your time. And if I can spend my time helping people all day, every day.
I think the approach that you're taking, with a relational driven and focused approach is fundamental, especially in the coaching world. And, you've got people knocking on your door because of the relationships that you've built, but the work that you do with your clients is so personal. It is so hands-on that you do need to take a more personal approach to connecting with them. And as you said, time is important today, right? Not just time for yourself, but actually being able to spend time with humans, right? We're in a tech-driven world. Everyone is seemingly moving further and further away from human interaction. And I think that's going to be the real differentiator for coaches and consultants alike moving forward. So being able to get in front of people and effectively build relationships with them, earn their trust, show them that you can and you want to contribute, not just something for yourself, but something to solve for them as well. You mentioned sending messages on LinkedIn, a little bit of cold outreach. Maybe they're in your fringe network, whatever it is. This is a big challenge for a lot of coaches today, because it's hard to have people be receptive to messages just because of the flood of messages that are coming in, right? Regardless of, how well-meaning you are and the real impact that you can and want to provide, it can be hard to break through that noise. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're observing just in the coaching world in general when it comes to actually effectively building relationships with people you can help?
I think there's a couple main challenges. One is follow through. I think that there's a lot of coaches and sort of like consultants who love the work, but they're terrible at the mechanics of sort of like follow-ups and stuff like that. And so getting really consistent with that is critical. Whether it's, hey, we talked back I just had a prospect who said, hey, I'm super busy right now in performance summary or in performance cycle. Want to talk with you in March about a leadership program that I'd love for you to build. Amazing. So what do? I put a calendar note and a reminder in my calendar. I put a little note and I say like, hey, I'm going to follow up with so-and-so on this date because I need to have that really good follow through. So, and I confirm that with them and say like, okay, if I don't hear from you before this, then just expect a note from me. So really clear and consistent follow through is important. I think the other thing too that's hard is, the authenticity piece. How are we? Your eyebrows raised on that one because it's like it's a real struggle. It's like, how do I sell a product or a service or sell me, which feels weird. How do I do that in a way that feels authentic? So it's not like I'm just constantly being like, hey, do you want coaching? Do you need coaching? So really trying to work through what that message is that feels right for you. And for me, it's like I've settled in on something that feels very real, which is like, if I can help, I help. Like it's as simple as that. And it doesn't have to have strings attached. It doesn't have to, maybe there's some partnership work down the line, but like, look, here's my calendar. If I can help, I can help. I help. And I think everyone needs to really come to the table with something that feels right for them. And if they don't have it, prospects, clients, they see those notes, they see the cold outreach that feels, AI generated. They see the things that feel templatized and stuff.
And there's two really important aspects to what you said. I just wanted to divide them into the first one being the follow-up. Right now, most business owners, probably 99%, if not more, business owners get into what they're doing because they're passionate about it. They love it. There's a greater purpose, whether it's for their lifestyle or for helping people, whatever it is. Most people don't get into business because they want to be a marketer. But in essence, especially as a startup, that is absolutely fundamental and required. But perhaps we can reframe people's thinking when it comes to marketing and follow-ups and keeping up with leads, right? Because in that follow-up, it's not just an extra task you have on your plate to get a client, but if you're in a position to actually help somebody and you can, that additional follow-up just adds to your ability to build more trust and build more of a relationship. Hey, I'm thinking of you. Hey, I read this article. I think this would apply directly to your situation. Hey, this came across my desk. I was working on it with a client. I thought it could really help you as well. So follow-ups don't have to be, hey, do you want to have a chat now? Hey, are you ready for my coaching? Whatever it is, let people know that you're thinking of them. They're on your mind. You want to help them, right? Build that relationship intentionally and use the follow-up as part of that process, which leads us into the second aspect of what you were saying. With cold outreach, it feels impersonal. Right? It feels like it's difficult to break the noise. It's not genuine. The biggest thing, and as you said, you want to let people know that you're here to help, right? That's what marketing is at the end of the day. Marketing needs to be an exchange of value. As soon as it's one-sided, it won't be receptive to the other person. So for the audience out there who's trying to get into cold outreach and make it more effective, actually provide something of value. Lead magnets are really popular and they can be good when they're really valuable and they get seen. But a better way to approach it is to engage somebody in a way that they feel they're contributing. Right? They feel that they're being recognized and heard and understood, not just for the sake of you sending them something to highlight how good you are, but actually get them engaged and get them bought into part of the process.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where I think like it converge on LinkedIn doom scrolling, like just seeing like what's my network up to, and then it's like who do I want to send a note out to, and it's like I just find that's a way more productive use of time for me personally. And it also is resonant with how I think about the business development to begin with. So yeah, I love that articulation, that distillation, David. I think that's spot on.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. I spent a lot of time thinking about this myself, so it makes sense. You're using AI to drive impact with your clients, but of course you're using AI internally for yourself and for Saville Coaching as well. Tell us a little bit more now where AI comes into play for your own growth strategy, not just incorporating it into helping clients.
Yeah, it's so I use it on the back end as well to just speed up my practices. So when I think about the skill development work that I may do with my coaching clients or even within facilitation work, that creates really consistent outcomes to help build those skills on the learner side. But on the business side, I use it to create really consistent products and sort of like outputs for me. And so I have a number of chat assistants that I use and agents that I've built that allow me to really speed up a lot of the administrative work. So when I think about structured coaching notes, I have an agent that runs a process that like gives me really thought out coaching notes for my clients. And so I can send those. And then that allows me to also prep for the next session. It helps me just keep track of where each client is. I have a feedback agent that looks at my coaching transcripts and it says, here's what you did well. Here's what you might have missed. Here's some subtext. Here's some things you might want to consider. Here's some additional questions you can poke and prod with for next time. And it just allows me to have a feedback loop in something that doesn't normally get a feedback loop unless you're doing coaching supervision or you're going through a coaching program that has like volunteers who come in and you fishbowl and all that. So getting that consistent feedback has been really beautiful. So those are just two examples where it's just sped up my time and it's actually really deepened my expertise. And I've noticed myself actually shifting my questions and pushing a little bit further because of the feedback I'm consistently getting.
Oh, I love that feedback loop that you're using, right? Not just to enhance delivery to your clients, but actually to improve yourself. And so you can continuously move forwards and have that feedback rather than trying to figure it out on your own, essentially. Something you mentioned is, using AI to free up your time and focus on, to free up low leverage tasks so you can focus on those that are more important. There has to be a line that's drawn in the sand, right? Where should people not be using AI, not handing things off to? Right? From your perspective as a people development expert, what are the biggest risks for coaches integrating AI into their practice when it comes to that developmental side?
One is privacy. So really making sure that you're being very thoughtful about where things are getting stored, which tools have access to what. Because if there was to be some sort of privacy leak or if you've stored all your transcripts on your G drive, for instance, that could be a problem, right? And that could be a breach of your contracts. So being really thoughtful about the structures that you have where you're storing things that the AI agents can reference and stuff like that. Important to do the due diligence there. The other thing I think that coaches right now in particular, and consultants generally, is just sort of that low quality prompt that people are using. So you really need to understand what makes a great prompt, because oftentimes what we see, and this is so true in LinkedIn right now, the slop that's it's just low quality, just junk. And it floods the feed, and it's just all written the same way. Ethan Malik, who writes prolifically about this, he's a professor and he focuses specifically on AI. He was talking about how we are starting to pick up some of the writing habits now of these AI models. So one of the sort of like perverse effects is like we are actually starting to sound more like the AI because we're just being exposed to so much of it. When we're just using it to try to like, hey, write me a LinkedIn post. I used it the other day to write a LinkedIn post. I was like, I kind of hate this, but also I don't have enough time. I'll do some minor edits to it. And then I sent it and I was like, what if I fed myself? We run the risk of sort of like dehumanizing, I think, a lot of things. And so you need to know when to pick and choose the moments to use that AI voice.
That's really interesting. And I think that probably presents a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel to creatives out there, right? Seeing that if everyone is using AI and people are starting to sound more like AI from lack of their own creativity, maybe AI isn't going to take over the world and take away jobs from all of the creatives. Maybe it's actually going to provide them with more value and more meaning because they can really differentiate themselves and really show people what it is that they do and how they think.
100%. Actually, I've started writing about this on my Substack, is that there are your data, sort of like your first party data, sort of like how you show up, your voice, all those things, like the way you approach problem solving, your creative output, that's your first party data. It's the most valuable thing that you can offer. And when you stop generating new first party data, when you stop evolving and sort of like growing with your knowledge base, it's when you're at risk to lose everything. So how do you keep refreshing, sort of like kind of coming back to that creative edge again and again without just offloading it all into a ChatGPT or to a Claude or to a Gemini? I think we run a real risk as a society for that. But that's a Substack post for a couple weeks from now.
Your story covers people engineering, strategic adaptation, and a deep commitment to human development. For the founders, the coaches, and the growth minded listeners who are navigating their own growth shift, what's the single most important piece of advice that you would leave them with about embracing an expansive version of themselves and building systems that enable growth?
Yeah, I think don't be afraid. Like when you think about embracing an expansive version of yourself, I think there's something really beautiful about what is the best version of myself, and then like go towards that. I think there's a lot of talk a while back about like be the authentic version of yourself. But actually, what we want to be framing this as is like, what's the best version of myself? What would be the best version of myself in these moments? And like, how might I be, maybe it's not in communication with lots of people. I'm an introvert. I don't love spending a ton of time with lots of people, but how do I really have a few deep, meaningful connections? So when we think about that expansive version, it's like, we should be growing. We should be really thinking about like the best version of me is doing this. And we should be really thinking about a deepening of those things. And so for me, it's how do I cultivate a few really important relationships? And then on the system side, I think it's like, it goes back to consistency. Great systems are consistent. So if I'm trying to deepen relationships, or if I'm trying to be the best version of myself, what have I put in place to actually create consistency? And a low stakes example of this is I have a board game group. So me and these two other guys, we play board games once a week, and we've been doing it now 5 years. And it's incredible. And we've actually become they're some of my closest friends now, but we have a calendar invite, and it's just a simple calendar hold. And every Thursday we know what board game are we playing. And we check in with each other and we chat and kind of like figure it out. But if we didn't have that calendar hold, if we had to schedule it every week and be like, what are we doing this week? It would fall off the calendar and it wouldn't be consistent. So like even just something as simple as a recurring calendar invite to just say like, hey, let's just check in. Even if it's every 3 months, and be like, how you doing? Like, what's going on? Is a powerful, powerful way to get out of your head to have those more deep and meaningful connections.
Ian, thank you so much for sharing your lessons, your insights, and your story with the audience today. For anyone listening who might like to learn more about Saville Coaching, or who might like to just continue the conversation, what would be the best way to find you?
Yeah, feel free to find me on LinkedIn, or you can just go over to savillecoaching.com and you can actually just find some time on my calendar. So if it's at all helpful and if I can help, I help. So just know that I have availability and always happy to talk shop, be a sounding board, bend in the air. So yeah, those are probably the two best ways that you can find me.
Ian, thank you for joining us today on The Growth Shift.
Well, David, thank you so much for having me. This was a lovely chat. So I really appreciate just the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you, and looking forward to future conversations.
Another powerful conversation on The Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on The Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.